Hey guys, Furum here, and today I'm going to be testing the Aston Martin DB11 for the second time in multiplayer in Asphalt 9, this time at 3 stars. Previously, almost 2 years ago actually, I did a video about this car at 2 stars. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and enjoy the video. I'm trying to go back through a lot of the old cars that I tested previously that I may not have done at max, or at least maximum stars, and do those again. Like we have this car as an example, but also the Exotic Rides W70, which I also made a video about probably almost 2 years ago at this point at 2 stars. Well, I've had it 3-starred for a long time now, so that is also another car that I plan on doing a max review of soon. I'm trying to get to the point where every single car in the game has a max stars review on my channel. Now, I'm not saying golden max for every car, because I know that's going to be really hard for a lot of cars and just not worth it on some of the not as good cars, which have very expensive epics to get in the Legend store. But at least at nearly max like this car here, for example. You know what's funny? When I went back to watch my earlier DB11 video in preparation for this one, toward the beginning of the video in one of the first races, I said the Corvette Grand Sport was a terrible car. That video came out even before the second update to the game, where they buffed the Corvette Grand Sport to how it is today, or at least how it was before a couple of updates ago, where they nerfed it again, but at least they didn't nerf it back to how it was before, because I don't know if many of you guys remember, but a long time ago, the Corvette was not nearly as good as it is today. And it's interesting to see the different driving styles back then, and how much my voice has changed as well. We were actually able to come in first in this car, ahead of 3 Acuras, a Pininfarina, an Apollo N, and an Aranera Hacera 33. In this race, we're facing 4 Dodge Viper ACRs, an Apollo N, a Pininfarina, and a Corvette Grand Sport. I am sure that a lot of them were very surprised to see a car such as this one with them in multiplayer. This car would have been better in the Slipstream season, but I had already gotten to Platinum League at the time where I thought about testing this car, so unfortunately that didn't happen, but I still got some pretty good races in it, as we can see in this video. And its biggest strength is its top speed, which isn't great by any means, but for a low-end B-class car, 220 miles per hour, or at least pretty close to that, is not too bad. I mean, it's technically faster in speed than cars like the, say, Asterion or Corvette Grand Sport, which are clearly better cars overall, but if you can get ahead of them in this car and you're able to get around the turns okay, they're not going to be really catching up to you. And in this race, we're actually catching up to a lot of the people ahead of us, because in this race, actually, every car has a slower top speed than us, except for that Apollo N, which I think helped me to get into first place here, as well as some cars not going up that jump back there, and we come in first in this race. This was not a race I expected to win at all, because while I may be faster than those cars, I mean faster than the Viper ACR by over 20 miles per hour, this car's other stats are its downfall, and it's what stops it from being higher in its class, and what stops it from being used in multiplayer in general, because its acceleration, handling, drifting, and nitro efficiency are all decidedly mediocre. None of them is worst in the game or anything like that, but it feels like a pretty cumbersome car to drive overall. It's not very fun. 2 years ago, when I made a video about this car previously, it was a lot more popular in multiplayer. One of the reasons is because back then we did not have access to the number of fast cars that we do in the game now, because this was one of the faster cars you could actually get early on in Asphalt 9, so a lot of people were using it because of that. And because of that as well, unfortunately, it was a car that a lot of hackers used, because back then there were a lot of shockwave hackers who would use their shockwave hacks and get up to their top speed all the time, whereas now we don't really see too many of those, thankfully. I haven't actually seen hardly any hackers at all that I can think of in Asphalt 9 Windows multiplayer recently. Now, I know Android is more plagued with them, but on Windows, they seem to have done a pretty good job of cleaning them up from multiplayer. Now, of course, there are still some occasionally in top of events, like usually the top 10 or so in some events will be hackers, but other than that, it's not too bad on this platform anymore. I would definitely say the biggest area now on Windows where hacks are causing the problem the most is in Grand Prix. because I've heard from some people that in Tier 1, especially very high Tier 1s, there are a lot of hackers in there, and you may get to a point up at the very top where some of the very best legit players in the game get paired up with a ton of hackers, which could definitely ruin your Grand Prix and mean the difference between you getting a car or not. Now, in the past Grand Prix, I think Gameloft has done an okay job of cleaning them up, but still, it's definitely no fun to be in a Grand Prix and then you just kind of see the person whose ghost you're racing against just kind of go off like crazy at the beginning of the race, and you know you can't beat him. Although I do remember in one of my videos recently, there was somebody who had that super fast acceleration at the beginning, and the person driving in the video, because I think this was on Android, was able to beat him 2 times in a row. Because if you are skilled enough, oftentimes you can beat certain times of hackers in multiplayer. And I remember I made that video a long time ago about beating the Shockwave hacker in actually a DB11 in my Acura, and in that video I mentioned how you can report hackers, and that page is still up. I'll put a link to that other video of mine about this car in the description, and I think in the description of that video is that link to report hackers. Now, at the very end of this race, we passed this Ford GT, which goes even faster than us, but has even worse other stats. Definitely, the DB11 and Ford GT feel kind of similar to drive. In this race, we are facing a Huracan, a Corvette Grand Sport, an S12 TDF, and a DBS Superleggera, which is a better multiplayer car than a lot of people think it is, probably because not a ton of people have it at very high stars. Some of you may have noticed that I have not been streaming as often as I usually do. That's because toward the end of the summer, I've been pretty busy. Now, there is a chance that I will be able to stream this Saturday. Haven't decided completely on that yet, but it is a possibility. So here we are on Rome, having gotten into 4 out of 5 position. I would say that the weakest point of this car is not even its nitro efficiency or acceleration, which are pretty bad, but the biggest problem that I ran into was its drifting, just losing so much speed and not being very sharp in general. This car loses speed rather quickly, and so on Rome, tracks like this, there was one race where I was in like 1 or 2, and then I went around a couple of turns, and all the Corvettes passed me because, well, I was going a lot slower around the turns, even though I am faster through the straights. But on tracks like Rome, for example, which have a lot of twisty turns, you're going to be able to get a net better lap with a car that has slightly worse top speed, but has a lot better of drifting speed. Here, though, we did beat that Corvette toward the end there as he went a slightly longer route, and so we come in second place, losing to a Huracan again, just like in the previous race. Our next race is on Rome, again against 2 Huracans, a Corvette Grand Sport, a Sin R1, a Viper ACR, and an F12 TDF, on a track that you guys probably know is one of the most narrow tracks in the game, with a lot of sections having only a few cars be able to fit next to each other on them. One advantage that I did have in the season, I guess, or at least I count it as an advantage, is that this was an unbreakable season. While this isn't as good for this car as Slipstream was, it did save me from a lot of stress. I know a lot of people do not like unbreakable seasons, but I have found that the issues you might have occasionally with bumping and getting slowed down are not nearly as prevalent or annoying as getting knocked down in a normal season. So that is why I do like unbreakable seasons, and I do like unbreakable Slipstream seasons as well. Now, that's a controversial one right there. You guys may know that usually in any season that isn't Rush, I try to get top 100. Now, in the last 2 seasons, I did manage to do that, and I'm going to try to do the same in the current 2 seasons as well. So we've managed to pass a Huracan and a Sin R1 with only a Huracan left ahead of us. I was afraid that the Huracan that was directly behind me would be able to catch up through this ending section, but thankfully I was able to maintain nitro throughout all of it and come in second place. You have to remember throughout these races that I'm in the low 2000 rank of my cars, below 2300, and most of the people I'm facing are above, like 37 or 3800 rank, 1500 above me. Like in this race, we have a 3900 rank SLR and a 3800 or so rank Corvette, who I actually have an extremely close race with in this final one in the video. And now it is time for my general review of this car. The Aston Martin DB11 is not a car that most people are probably going to want to use in multiplayer because there are plenty of other cars that are easy to get that are better and easier to drive. That being said, this car is certainly not bad if you do enjoy driving those cars that might not be as agile overall, because its speed is still quite decent. As you can see in this race, I'm not catching up really to this Corvette, but I'm staying at a pretty similar pace as him. Overall, this is an okay car to use in early Gold League if you are okay with the mediocre drifting, handling, nitro efficiency, and acceleration, but I do not think it will most likely be able to get you to Platinum, and you probably don't want to use it once you're really trying hard to get to there. So we're coming up toward the end of this race, and I'm catching up to this Corvette Grand Sport a little bit because my top speed is a bit higher than his, and I actually catch up quite a lot in the air, and I thought I could pass him around the turn. We crossed the finish line almost neck and neck, but unfortunately I am handed the second position. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like the video if you have enjoyed, and consider subscribing for more Asphalt and other games content. And I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye!